Okay, this video has the second half of section 2.3. So we already talked about slope, and now we are going to do slope-intercept form, which is just y equals mx plus b. And just as a reminder of what's going on here, we've got four variables, but m will stand for the slope, right, which we were just talking about, and this b will stand for where it crosses on the y-axis. All right, so we're going to have like an xy coordinate plane, and x and y actually make up all the points on this line. So these are all little xy points, and those are the xy variables. And then the slope is like the steepness, like we talked about. And then b stands for where it crosses on the y-axis. So like in this example, if it crossed at like 2, b would be 2 in the equation. All right, that's a quick review of slope-intercept form. All right, so if we have to construct the equation for the line, basically y and x again represent the different points on the line, and then we're going to fill in the slope and the y-intercept. And how you do it is a little different on each question, but on this particular question, the y-intercept is pretty straightforward. That's just 2 where it crosses. All right, and then the slope, just like we did in the previous lessons, we just got to find the slope. So just take 2 points. All right, so I always try and find whole number points like these ones, right? And then just say, well, what is the change between those points? So here we're going down 3 and right 2. So the up or down goes on chop, the rise, I guess in this case it's falling, but that goes on the top. So it's negative 3 over 2 x. So we have y equals negative 3 over 2x plus 2. All right, and so when I do my points, I always go up or down first and then to the right. Okay, so because this one was down, it's a negative slope. All right, so I either go down and right or up and right. I always go to the right, and then this number will always be positive, the bottom number in your fraction. Okay, and as we talked about in the previous video, this should be a negative slope because we're going downhill. All right, so we got the slope, we got the y-intercept, and that is the equation that represents all the xy points that are on that blue line. All right, a couple other questions about slope-intercept form. And it's all about, like, all of these questions are the same. You just have to figure out the slope and the y-intercept, right? And how you do that is a little different each time, but that's the main thing, is you got to fill in those 2 pieces of information to get your equation. So pause the video and see if you can figure these out. All right, so this one we're just filling in slope of 2, y-intercept of 5, and that's it. The y-intercept does look a little different here, right? Oftentimes they'll just call it like 5 instead of 0, 5, but I do think it's good to remember that it is a point, right? And what happens is the x-coordinate of that point is always 0. So any point on our y-axis, the x-coordinate, if you think about any point on here, the x-coordinate will be 0. Right, so oftentimes they just list it as 5, but technically speaking, that's a y-intercept is an xy point. All right, second one is real similar. So you just fill in the slope, negative slope times x, the slope goes in front of x, and then the y-intercept is off on its own, right? And you can write it as -2 or plus -2, either one of those is correct. All right, so when you're dealing with lines, right, linear equations, straight lines, there's actually 3 different forms, right? Hopefully you remember some of this from Algebra 1. We have the slope-intercept form, all right? That's what we've been doing. There's one called point slope, and there's one called standard form. So in section 2.4, we're going to go over these different forms, right? But just know that the next couple questions are about converting between the forms. So I forget what the question is. So yeah, this one looks like it's in standard form, and you have to convert it up here to slope-intercept form. Okay, so part of this chapter is being able to convert between the different forms for a line. All right, so here we go. So this would be standard form. So just to get a little practice, standard form where x and y are on the same side of the equation. So you don't really have to know that yet, but currently it's in standard, and we want to get it in slope-intercept. And so for slope-intercept, that just has y by itself. Okay, so when they ask for slope-intercept, that just means get y alone. All right, so for this particular one, you can subtract 9x. Okay, so we get negative 2y equals 10 minus 9x. All right, and now we almost have y alone, right? We got rid of this positive 9x, so this is not a subtract 2, but a times negative 2. So to reverse that, we're going to divide by negative 2. All right, and so this then becomes negative 5, and then negative divided by negative becomes positive 9 halves, and I'm just going to leave it as a fraction like that. All right, and so the kind of one of the tricks to remember here is you divide one side by negative 2, you got to take the entire other side divided by negative 2. All right, so one of the reasons we have the different forms is slope-intercept form is the easiest one to graph. So now that we have it in this form, here is our slope. The thing that's in front of x is our slope. And then the part that's not with x is our y-intercept. Okay, so if we want to graph, we can just plot a point at negative 5 and then use a slope of 9 halves. So I would go up 9, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, because it's positive, and then to the right 2. So when I do my slope, I always go to the right. So in this case, because it's positive, I go up and right. And then I'll do my best here to connect these dots. But yeah, sorry, that's not a very straight line. But hopefully you get the idea that you connect those two dots, and then you've created a graph of our equation, right? And it really is both of these equations, just this form is easier to graph out of. Okay, last example here is we're starting in standard form with x and y on the same side again, and we've got to convert it into slope-intercept form. All right, convert it into y equals form. One of the things that's tricky here is this has fractions in it. All right, and so when you have an equation with fractions, the trick I'm going to recommend is just to actually get rid of the fractions and make it one that doesn't have fractions. All right, and so the way this is accomplished is looking at the denominators. So this fraction bar means divide, right? That's what fraction means, like negative 3 divided by 4 and 1 divided by 4. So we can eliminate these divide 4s by multiplying by 4. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take everything on both sides times 4, and then these denominators will disappear. All right, so I'm going to write out all the steps here since it's the first time, but I'm taking 4 over 1 times the fraction negative 3 over 4. So that will be, if we multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators, we get negative 12 fourths x. Take 4 over 1 times 1 over 4. So we'll get 4 over 4. Multiply numerators and denominators. Okay, and then don't forget we also have to take this other side times 4. So that'll give us 64. All right, and now these fractions actually reduce. So negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. And 4 divided by 4 is just 1. And you don't really have to write the 1 there. You can if you want. But so what actually happened is this times 4 canceled out these divide 4s. And we ended up with our numerator of negative 3 and 1. Right? This is 1y. Okay, so realistically, you don't have to do all this math over here and the steps inside here. I just do it to show you if you wanted to do all the steps. But what's really happening is these divide 4s are canceling with this multiply 4 and giving us whatever is left in our numerators. Okay, so you don't really have to write out all that intermediate step unless you really want to. Okay, so we're not quite to slope-intercept form, so maybe pause the video and see if you can see the last step. All right, and that last step is just to add 3x. Right, so to get y alone, this is a subtract or minus 3x. So if we add 3x to both sides, then we'll have 64 plus 3x. Right, and if you really want to write it the exact way, you can write the slope part first, 3x plus 64. But realistically, it doesn't matter. Either one of these where y is alone is slope-intercept form. Okay, that's it for our lesson. So our assignment again is just this little puzzle piece right here. Um, Obviously, here's our complete notes if you need them, and then I think I talked about this as a note sheet. It's kind of an optional thing for you to use. All right, that's it. As always, reach out if you have any questions.